So we're taking some inspiration from the picture at the top, and the photo at the bottom is our source. As we learnt from week 1, it's important to choose the right paper, so that's your first challenge, is to find the paper. I chose this paper. It's got a little bit of tooth on it, similar to the inspiration. There's obviously some kind of texture on that paper. And then we've got to choose our brushes out of all the different brushes that we've got. And I went for 3. I went for quite a big round brush, what is a sign painter's brush, and also a rigger, or actually it's a sword, I think. And then choosing our paints. So I put masking tape around it because I wanted to create a border. It's also, the paper was slightly different dimensions as well than the painting. And then we've put a wash of water on. It was slightly bluey because the water was a little bit blue, but that's okay because we want a bit of a blue under tinge anyway. And we're doing wet in wet and putting paint in. So you can see I'm kind of just sort of dropping the paint in at this point. And the first incarnation of it was quite insipid, so I'm just adding lots more kind of paint in. And at this point it's going to blur, but that's kind of, if you look at the inspiration and also at the photo, it's quite a blurred background. And the background of any image, you know, whether you're looking at it in reality or you're looking at it through a photo, is going to be more blurred. Yeah, it's just the kind of the way your eyes work, that you'll see less detail in the distance than you'll see in the near ground. So we're kind of hoping for, with this bit, we're wanting something quite nice and blurry. Remember, we're going to start putting our trees on top, and that's kind of the focus, but we want to spend a bit of time on our background getting it right. Remember that when you put paint in, you can also take paint back out again, so get yourself a little bit of tissue and dab some of the paint out. So that was really useful in this picture because there's kind of quite a nice light on the water that I didn't want to lose the whites of the paper. So I'm carrying on putting some in. I put quite a bright yellow ochre in there, you can see, but remember that watercolours always dry a little bit lighter, so we don't need to worry too much. We don't want to go too dark because we want most of our darks in the foreground, but we do want a little bit of definition. And I also found there were some nice tinges in the sky, so you don't see them when you first look at them. I didn't choose this lemon yellow, for example, when I chose my first colours for my paints, but it really sort of helped to sort of give the painting a bit of a ping. So as you're kind of working out as you're painting, it's a little bit of trial and error, but the useful thing to know is if you do make an error, you can take stuff out with a bit of paper, and you can wash it right back to nothing if you want to, and you can keep adding colour in. I should have probably waited for it to dry a little bit, but this corner down here, I hadn't really done very much work on it, so I thought I could put some more detailed images in there. So you can see I'm using the sign writer's brush. It's quite a long brush, it's got a nice flow, it holds quite a lot of paint. Yeah, it's one that I did buy for sign writing, but it's really useful for sort of natural forms like this. So equally, a rigger or a, you know, a small kind of round brush would be good as well. So I'm putting in the trees. I'm going quite dark because as you can see in the inspiration painting that we've taken, those dark figures in the foreground are kind of almost like silhouettes, really. So it allows us to be true to the photo, which actually has very little detail in the trees because they are silhouetted, and also the inspiration as well. So going quite dark. When you're doing the natural forms, the twigs and things, don't put an awful lot of paint on your brush. You actually kind of want the paint to run out towards the end because that gives you a nice kind of thinner end to the tree, a more natural form. How many branches you put in is kind of up to you, but you kind of want to put in enough that it gives it some interest and looks natural, but not too many that it gets a bit confused. So yeah, it's really easy when you're kind of enjoying doing this kind of gestural work, which is similar to what we did in week 2 when we did the abstract painting. So it's also kind of, my hand was at a bit of a funny angle because the camera was over the top of me, so I'm holding my brush slightly differently maybe than I would in reality, but it's kind of similar to sort of Chinese painting, where you're kind of, you know, it's kind of a gesture creates one bit of twig. So yeah, continuing, lots more natural forms. Remember that as the branch gets closer to the tree, it will get wider, and as it goes further away, it will be narrower. So this was an interesting point because there was a silver birch and there was some light on it, you know, as silver birches have that kind of light bit down them. I was struggling with painting the silver birch. If you look over to the right, you saw that when I put in the negative space behind, that really brought out the tree. So again, this is kind of another exercise here in negative space. I'm going back over the background and I'm thinking, right, what bits do I need to add in? One, to balance the painting, but also to kind of integrate that kind of positive space, the things, and the negative space behind. And I went back in with a Stanley knife just to try and pull out some kind of detailed whites, but the paper wasn't really particularly responsive to that. Depends on your paper whether it will take a lot of scratching. And there is the finished piece, which I'm quite pleased with.